We get support from Audible. We've all got busy schedules. And I'm sure sometimes you feel like, with all the things you have to do, it's hard to find time for the stuff you love to do, like reading. That's why Audible is so great. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from bestsellers and new releases to celebrity memoirs, mysteries and thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. Plus, as an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog, including the latest bestsellers and new releases. And also, I have to say, I love how the Audible app makes it easy to listen anytime, anywhere. When you're traveling, working out, walking, doing chores, wherever your day takes you. Cleaning the bathroom has really never been more fun. Let Audible help you discover new ways to laugh, be inspired, or be entertained. New members can try it free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/listening or text listening to 500-500. That's audible.com/listening or text listening to 500-500 to try Audible free for 30 days. Audible.com/listening.
I mean, come on, no one plans to get sick. And yet, here we are. My name is Matthew Zachary. I survived cancer, a stroke, and COVID-19, and I'm still here. I also survived our broken healthcare system, and I want to help you survive it too. So let's go make healthcare suck less together, because we're all out of patience. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. A quick reminder before we get started. If you like the show and you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, a review maybe. It helps other people find the show that you hopefully like a lot. Or don't, either way. On the show today, bio-entrepreneur Marty Kaiser, founder of IV BioHoldings, LiquidLung, HepGene, and Mammogen. What is a biomarker? Hint, it's not inside a box of Crayola. Biomarkers are aspects of our genes that do so much more than just determine our height, our eye color, and believe it or not, yes, our predisposition to cancer. Diagnostic tools today can be used to detect earlier, diagnose earlier, and treat better with less toxicity. And that's what Marty and his ventures are all about. In the spirit of making cancer suck less, diagnostics and biomarkers have the potential to make traditional radiation and chemo perhaps not even necessary in the first place. Enjoy the show. Marty Kaiser, thank you so much for coming out of patience. I've been really looking forward to talking to you about, again, all the things. We have a lot in common, but besides mishpachaing out, it was just genuinely exciting to meet somebody who's actually done shit that matters in healthcare on the private sector side. But let's start by introducing you. Where do you come from? What did you do? Did you go to school for anything related to what you're doing today?
What a great question. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on this show today. But I guess I'll start with your last question. The answer is no. I did not go to school, for any sort of medical practice. I've never spent any time in the medical community. My entire career was spent in finance. I was on Wall Street for a little more than a decade. I was raising capital for various investment strategies, many of which had, fairly, heavy allocations and exposure to biotechnology, to healthcare. And so I've always been sort of in and around the space, at least from an investment standpoint, for a very long time, but made the transition in 2018 away from finance. Literally sold the home, liquidated all assets, pushed all in to create my own bio-innovation studio called IV BioHoldings. And IV BioHoldings really is specializing in de novo company creation. We are literally creating companies from the ground up. I'm controlling all of the idea generation, the branding, the marketing, the fundraising, the team building, the strategy, the execution, and really trying to build a series of disease-specific companies, all centered around novel biomarkers that can unlock our ability to radically improve the way that we detect, diagnose, and treat disease. And so that's what I've been up to for the past 2.5 years. And to date, we've launched 3 companies out of the studio, one in lung cancer called LiquidLung, the second in liver disease called HepGene, and the third and most recent, which we launched in October of last year, called Mammogen, which has a flagship product in breast cancer detection, but will ultimately be evolving and growing into a pure play women's health organization. And so it was sort of an indirect path from finance to bio-entrepreneur, but I got here and did it.
I'll ask the question then. Obviously, I say obviously with my naive, I'm not an investor guy hat on. If you're working in that sector that isn't healthcare, the exit, the goal, the scaling, it's fairly self-evident. You kind of have a very linear path and established precedent on what it means to scale and grow and exit. In healthcare, it's fucked up because you're developing programs, products, tools, and services in a supply-only economy. There's no demand to get an esophageal cancer test because no one wants esophageal cancer. No one wakes up and says, and I'm famous for saying this, I can't wait to be on Keytruda one day and get that clinical trial. How have you squared the circle on what scaling success and investor expectations are in a supply-only market?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I guess I'd pull from an entrepreneur that I have a deep respect for, who I've been following for a number of years, named Peter Diamandis, who, he has this wonderful line that, we are living in the golden age of innovation, and we now have more access to data and knowledge and capital all at our fingertips. I mean, in our iPhones, you've heard the stats, but it's true that you have access to more information and more knowledge and more compute power than was only available to the top Fortune 100 CEOs for decades. And because of that, and the statement that he makes is, in this age of innovation, the next generation of billionaires will be those who solve billion-person challenges. And I was really, really inspired by that concept. And I think it ties a lot into the stakeholder capitalism discussion that's happening that I think is very fascinating. And a lot of that just comes down to the fact that with access to data, with access to technology, with access to all different types of creative capital structures, whether it's crowdfunding or blockchain, there's all these different things that come together that allow us to do things very quickly, very efficiently. And because we can do them quickly and efficiently, there's still a wonderful profit to be made, and at the same time be able to do good. And so I look at this whole opportunity, I look at the investment side of it with the social impact and the social opportunity of it. And it's not one versus the other the way it used to be. It's actually both. And so I look at that, very much through that lens and from that perspective. And so, an example of what I mean by that is, in pharma, let's just say it takes on average 10 years to develop a drug. It can cost around $1 billion, and 9 out of 10 times they fail. And so because of that, you have to just sort of logically expect that the one drug that does make it through approval has to be priced at a pretty high price point to offset all of the wasted time and money and costs that went into the 9 other failures. And so it's this perpetual cycle of just long lead times, high cost, and all of that ends up getting passed through, and it just distorts the whole investment profile, which is very funny. It's one of the reasons why you see, most venture capital funds and most venture models being this, we'll invest in 10 companies, expect 9 to fail, and hope that one of the one winner pays for all the failures. It's very much correlated with what you're talking about in healthcare. And I think it's effed up too. And I'm here to change that through unique processes and unique business models.
So I'm hearing a lot of things and I'm trying to process, because my job is to not think like you. My job is to think like me, but figure out that you're probably saying all the right things. What was this specifically outside maybe the enticing nature of solving a $1 billion problem with $1 billion solution? Why healthcare from finance? Was there an interconnection? Did something happen to you or someone you care about?
Well, it started with the the finance side. I mean, that was the lens that I looked at everything through, and just seeing trends, seeing opportunities, believing that we're in the very early innings of a massive, massive renaissance. And at the center of that renaissance is, from my standpoint, we could talk more about this if it's of interest to your listeners, but the opportunity, the greatest opportunity here is in biomarkers. And so it started with this, I see something really big there. I see a massive trend. I see a massive opportunity, but it was balanced by a deep and genuine love for people that I have always had, a deep and genuine desire to help and to give back. And when I was in finance, the reality is I just wasn't feeling that. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. You can convince somebody to move $1 billion from one pocket to the other, and you can make a great living doing it, but but it's not all that rewarding. And so it sort of came from that combination of those things, of saying there's a great opportunity there to make a lot of money and to create a lot of wealth, not just for myself, but to save money for the system and to save money for patients and for payers. I mean, there's all kinds of economic benefit from using data and technology and biomarkers. But then there's a great social impact, and it's very purpose-filled. It's very rewarding. But here's the thing that's a little bit different. And I come across people, and your story is an amazing story, and people that get blindsided by disease, and it changes their whole entire perception of things, and it changes the course of their life. They do great things like you have. And then there's guys like me that just say, it hasn't affected me personally. Yes, I have people in my family and very close network that have either battled and survived, or battled and did not, from all different types of cancers. But the way I look at it is, I really wanted to get ahead of it. I didn't want to wait until it hit me personally to say, man, I wish I had leveraged my skill set and my relationships and my knowledge. I wish I did this earlier. So I'm actually on the opposite end of the spectrum, where I'm just trying to do everything I can to get ahead of it before it sideswipes me or somebody in my immediate family. And I work really hard towards making that happen.
I love the idea that, most people are, I don't care about it till it happens to me, but you're like let's try to make it not happen to other people first.
Exactly.
But so let me dig into just more of a one-on-one, like kindergarten question. What the hell is a biomarker in third grade plain English?
It's a great question. We all have biological markers floating around in our body, and that could be a gene, it could be an RNA, it could be a protein, it could be a lipid, it could be a metabolite. There's all the fancy, science, biology, for dummies 101 that it could be, but they're really just biological markers floating around in our body that carry information, and that's why we call them biomarkers. And up until this point, the primary focus on biomarkers has been on single markers that can typically predict or project something, meaning you carry this specific gene, therefore you are at a X% greater chance of developing XYZ disease. And or you carry this marker, therefore you are very likely to respond well to Keytruda or whatever the immunotherapy or targeted treatment is. That's where the focus on biomarkers has been. Where I see the opportunity and where I'm at the center of the opportunity is in not just single markers that predict or project, but combinations of biomarkers. They don't all have to be the same thing. They could be, an RNA, a messenger RNA, or a microRNA, or a messenger RNA combined with proteins. You can combine a lot of these different things. And if you find these unique combinations of biomarkers, and if you can string them together mathematically, you can not only just predict and project things, but you can definitively detect, definitively diagnose. You can use those combinations of things to detect earlier, diagnose easier, and treat better. And that's the opportunity that I'm exploiting. And that's really ultimately what a biomarker is.
So if I'm explaining this to my 10-year-old boy who loves cars, I'd say, if you happen to have a V12, you're more likely to get into a car accident.
Yeah, that's a good example. I'd say on the car analogy, there's two things you could also look at from the DNA side, your actual genetic makeup. You could look at DNA almost like the blueprint to a Formula One race car. It tells you exactly where everything's supposed to be and what it should be doing. But you could look at the RNA, which the transcriptomics, as opposed to the genomics, and you look at the RNA, and the RNA is telling you how that race car is doing on the racetrack. It's giving you the real-time readout of the car's performance, it's telling you exactly what's happening in real time. And in healthcare, that's a really powerful thing, because that way you can look at these combinations of biomarkers and look at the way that they're being expressed, and it's telling you the patient's current state. You have this disease or you don't. You have stage 1 or stage 2 cancer based on the way these RNAs are being expressed, or you don't. And so those are the types of things. So you're just taking it one step further than that, and not just telling you where it's supposed to be and what it should be doing. You're actually saying this is how it's performing.
Back with our guest after the break.
Has your chronic illness made it difficult to continue working in the traditional way? Want to learn how to find and create flexible remote work that both accommodates your chronic illness and generates an income? Join the Patients Getting Paid membership, a community of chronicpreneurs where people just like you find workshops and trainings, weekly updated condition-specific gigs, twice monthly coaching calls, co-workings, accountability, and the kindest community to support you on your path to make money while working from anywhere and taking good care of yourself. Learn more or join us at patientsgettingpaid.com.
So let's talk about go to market. Like, you have this great idea, you build this great team, you get all the investors to back this big vision, and you need patience, right? You need really smart people over here, but you're ultimately looking at your end user, which is kind of a combination of a doctor, a payer, and a human being who's going to need your crap, right? So where do you put the value of the actual human being patient that's going to benefit from the stuff you're making in the growth and development of the company?
It starts from the absolute very beginning. So when I'm incubating a venture and I'm trying to figure out, where is there a disease where it's really tough to, detect it or not possible to detect it early? Where is it really difficult to diagnose, takes a long time, costs a lot of money, there's a lot of risk involved? What does that journey look like? And I look at it, I think this is one of the benefits, Matt, because I'm not from industry and I'm just a human being looking at it as a human being. I look at these problems, I look at the current standard of care and say, where can we make it better? Where are the bottlenecks? And if I were to get diagnosed with this tomorrow, what would my journey look like? What would that experience look like? And when I've identified, what I think is a disease that we should be focusing on, and I identify those bottlenecks, I find people who have been personally affected by them. The sad truth is, there's no shortage of people that have, especially in my network, that have had lung cancer, breast cancer, that are living with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So I start by going to the patient and saying, what did your journey look like, and where could it have been better? And this isn't always just about, I got a CT scan or I got an X-ray. A lot of times we're talking about the emotional aspect of it too. And, what was the amount of time that went by between the first nodule that showed up on a chest X-ray and the time that you went under your MRI? And when people come back and say, oh, it was 2 months or a month and a half, you just sit there and you can start to think that must have been the most stressful month of your life. and so there's a lot of that human element that goes into it from the very beginning. But from the commercial, the go-to market, the productization, getting this into people's hands, I think about it in the context of something that I call, and I haven't trademarked it yet. I don't know if I'm the only one saying it, but I like to think about it in the context of a solutions-based movement. So you have these wonderful movements that gain huge amounts of attention. You get people marching in the street, millions of people buying into raising awareness for something, no matter what it is. But more times than not, they fizzle out. And all of a sudden, what felt like this white hot movement and opportunity, 6 months later, you're like, where'd that go? What was that hashtag? What happened there? And people forget about it. And the number one reason why that happens is because they're not in many cases, not offering a viable long-term solution to whatever that problem was. And so what I'm trying to do here is build that awareness from the very beginning of saying, do you know that if you had shortness of breath and you thought you might have lung cancer, do you know what that process looks like? Do you know where the bottlenecks are? Here's how we could fix it. Here's how we could solve it. And getting people really excited that, yeah, we're not just raising awareness to something. We're raising awareness and we're attaching a solution to it. And my goal is to get patients so bought into that they're with us throughout that journey. Yes, it might take 3 years. It might take 5 years. It might take 10 years to get the product fully commercialized to a point where you could walk into Quest Labs and draw your blood and find your results. But if we can build out that sense of community from the very beginning with the patient, and then complement that from the top down with foundations and with advisors and with the FDA and with all the payers, you get this really powerful bottoms up and top down combination. And that's where you really unlock the full potential to really make an impact on people's lives.
All right. So let's focus on the liquid lung, because I think that's an interesting, like, people can relate to lung cancer. It's the number one killer in the country and cancer and blah, blah, blah. So not to dismiss it by saying blah, 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 but in general. So the whole mission of like the nonprofit space and ideally in well-intended human beings like yourself is to make cancer suck less and try not to get it. And this isn't about like don't smoke and don't eat. No, it's like it's shit's going to happen no matter what. You can't. The only prevention is don't own a pet, and you'll never be a pet owner. I just solved the problem for the world. Pet ownership. Prevention. Okay. So
that's simple.
Done. We're just done. Good night, folks. So in the world of, no one plans to get sick, as I say at the top of the show. And when you enter that shit happens, I have cancer store, who's helping you know shit exists and who do you depend on? How do these diagnostics, I mean, this isn't chemo, radiation, surgery. This is like shit. It's like you need to go through the car wash to get clean before you fix whatever's wrong with the car. That was a horrible analogy. My whole point is that I'm rambling because when you're in that store, you don't know what to do. So what if Quest can do this wonderful test for you? If you don't know it and your doctor doesn't know it, what's the solve?
That's the awareness piece of the equation, and working with patients and payers and providers, people, insurance companies and doctors. I mean, that's really that's the trifecta of getting everybody to say, this is the technology. Here's how it works. Here's how it, how it helps. Here's how it improves your outcome. And yeah, you make a good point about, people don't want to get cancer. The goal here is to just, if you do, just try to make it not suck. And I'll tell you, the number one way to make any cancer not suck is to catch it early. If you catch it early, the whole entire experience is better. Now, listen, it still sucks because, when you talk about any cancer, but let's point to breast cancer for a minute, the standard of treatment for breast cancer, almost regardless of what stage you have, is what I read this in an article somewhere. It's they call it slash poison and burn. Cut off your breasts, pump you full of chemo, and radiate the hell out of it. And so, yeah, you've got about 100% survival rate if you do that. But who the hell wants to cut off their breasts and get pumped full of chemo and get burned to hell with radiation? So it still does suck, but the earlier you catch it, the less it sucks and the better your outcomes and the lower the cost. And all of that is really the game changer in terms of, the next step.
I agree. I mean, and I'm coming out of the pediatric cancer world and the young adult cancer world where like nothing is really detectable because you can't get the mammograms, you can't get the colonoscopies. Maybe Cologuard works, who knows? And testicular cancer is only as good as the doctor taking you seriously, or like colon cancer is Crohn's disease or whatever. But writ large, you're right. Fran Drescher famously said, it shouldn't have been her to first say it, but she said it, that stage one's the cure. In an ideal world, yes. So I like the fact that we have better systems now. And let me just preface this by saying 25 years ago, you kind of just died. So these are good problems to have. Let's level set where we're at right now in general.
But let's level up. But we have to level up. And so, yes, we're so much better off today than we were 25 years ago, but there's so much room for improvement. And I'll give you a quick example on lung cancer. So you've had great recommendations and guidelines just recently come out of the USPSTF. It's the task force that creates the guidelines for screening and early detection, things like that. And they came out with a new draft recommendation, first time in I think about 7 years, that expands the eligibility criteria for people based on their age and their smoking history to be eligible for annual low-dose CT screening. So yeah, you think you kind of fit that profile of a high-risk patient for lung cancer based on your age, your smoking history. You can just go and get an annual low-dose CT scan and try to catch it early. And so that's great, but you're still looking at the problem at the body through this kind of 3D imaging. And yeah, the resolution is so much better today on these machines than it was years ago. The radiation exposure is so much lower, but you're only getting one view of what's happening to that patient. And it's very much a kind of 2 and 3 dimensional view. What I'm saying is to level things up. We're not trying to get rid of these machines at all. The goal here is not to replace the current standard of care and technologies. It's to enhance them and radically improve it and insert non-invasive biomarker testing at those different pain points. So you rule more people into imaging that belong there, and you rule more people out of unnecessary procedures and biopsies. You cover both ends of that spectrum, but there's so much valuable information that comes out of a CT scan or out of an MRI, but you can combine that data and that information with the biomarker measurements for a much fuller picture of what's happening with that patient. And that's really where you start to make a more meaningful impact to those high-risk patients so that you can catch them in stage 1. And Fran is right. Stage 1 is essentially the cure.
Right. So it's not just like try to not get cancer. It's try to not have chemotherapy if possible.
Yeah. Yep.
So let me ask you one more question. This goes back to my lack of understanding of investor strategy and investor philosophies in health startups. And that goes back to, and you kind of clarified it in the earlier segment, but the role of the patient and the role of the nonprofit to start to get that basic consumer sentiment, journey, experience for the disease you're trying to create a product or service for. And where I've seen this happen on the stupid cancer side when I ran that organization for, 13, 14 years, was that these really well-intended, well-meaning startups that have great tech that patients should know about simply want to just tap the community and say, hey, tell all your community members with breast cancer about this great thing. We want to hear from them. But the fact that the nonprofit has, 400,000 people in their community to tap for you is because they're funded to have that community. So where is the philanthropic aspects of early startups that are investor-backed on the value of donating money to the nonprofits to sustain them so they have the community you need to tap?
So reframe that briefly for me. Are you asking how to increase donorship to the nonprofits so that it all comes full circle more? Is that the question?
Well, typically it's like, we don't have a budget for charity. We just want your people.
Oh, interesting. I see your question there. I think this is where you could start to get creative in certain ways. First off, there should be a budget for it. and I think
hallelujah.
Right. I think, but I do think you're seeing, this is back to my finance days. And before I left the asset management industry, it was very clear that the demand for ESG funds, socially responsible funds and strategies was on the rise. And that's only taken off in the last 2.5 years. So you are starting to see a really nice shift of investors that are saying, look, we're happy to invest in great technologies where we think we can earn a strong ROI, but we really want to know that there's a social component to that and that you're helping, really advance things beyond just what's happening inside this company and beyond just the ROI. So I do think that there's an opportunity for the foundations and for the venture funds and for the entrepreneurs to come together and strike a happy balance and happy medium there. It's a great suggestion.
I genuinely love your just unabashedly authentic approach to this and this idea of we can do well and do good. That's kind of refreshing to hear from private sector venture guys. I'm not used to hearing that. So kudos and bully on you for that.
Thank you.
And I just to wrap this up, I love that you're here to not just, jokingly make cancer suck less. But if you can avoid the horribleness of the worst of cancer treatment, let's try to make that happen.
Yep. And I think it's a matter of just looking at the problem differently. One of the biggest issues with healthcare is that most people in that system have been in that system for their entire lives, for their entire career. And I think it helps that I'm coming at this from a different lens. I'm coming at it as a human being, but I'm also coming at it and saying there's different ways that we can do this. It doesn't have to be done the same old way. It doesn't take a PhD to realize that something that takes 10 years, costs $1 billion, and fails 9 out of 10 times probably could use a new approach. It doesn't take much to do that. And so I'm trying to look at it and say, where can we use data and technology and capital and integrate those things in a way where we can compress the time, the cost, and the risk, but still accelerate the value. And I will tell you just, one concept that's really important to me is I think we're in this era, and I'm leading that within my companies, where the role that human beings play in this process is different. We're not eliminating the need for people whatsoever, but we are sort of moving them to a different part of the process. Here's what I mean by that. Instead of spending 6 or 7 years in a wet lab looking through a microscope with 1 or 10 or 100 really, really smart scientists with their own domain sort of bias and their own kind of thoughts and their own experiences, we can just replace a big chunk of that process with data and completely objective mathematics and technology. But that doesn't replace the need for people. So when I discover a biomarker, because it simply emerges out of our technology, out of our software, I'm not a scientist, so I can't make a whole lot of sense of it. So I need advisors, I need key opinion leaders, I need people that I can show this to and say, hey, here's what we found. And we found it really fast and really efficiently, but we know nothing about it. Can you help us make sense of this? And it's the people that help us accelerate the growth and accelerate the commercialization, accelerate the adoption. So I think all of that comes together and allows us to, like you said, to generate a good ROI because we're doing things faster, more efficiently, but do good and speed the innovation to patients. That's the primary goal.
Marty Kaiser, bio-entrepreneur, founder of IV BioHoldings, LiquidLung, HepGene, Mammogen, and I'm sure a whole lot of other things that sound like they belong in the Mall of the Simpsons. Thank you for joining me on Out of Patience. More to come, my friend. Be well.
Thank you, Matthew. Take care.
That's all for today, folks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a product of Offscript Media. Our executive producer is Matthew Zachary. Our senior producers are Jen Horangeff and Andrew McDowell. Darren Tunn is our production intern. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Matthew Zachary. Our theme music is by the Mike Van Allen Quintet and by Mara. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscript.com. Hit us up at contact@offscript.com to share comments, feedback, and make guest recommendations. For more information, visit offscript.com.